Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from Rouse IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to the Daily News Simplified, an analysis of the Hindu newspaper from UPSC perspective. Today we will discuss the Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 6th August 2020. Now, in our weekly series of the mains question assignment from the Daily News Simplified, the question for today's assignment is: in what ways would the ongoing India-China clash along the line of actual control alter India's bilateral relation with the United States of America? And how should India respond to this situation? So, this question has been created from the DNS of 20th July 2020 from the article Making the Right Call on Malabar Going Quad. So you may watch the discussion before writing your answer. However, there are few important things that you must follow while writing the answers. So you can type the answer in the comment box on the eLearn platform, or you may click the image JPG file and send your answer to us. And all those who will send their answers by Saturday will get the evaluation and feedback from the Rouse IAS teachers. Further, post your answers in the portrait mode only. And you should not post your answers in someone else's answer. So use the comment or post your answer at the bottom of the thread to submit your answer to the main thread. Try to keep a tab on the time taken and mention the time taken for you to write your answer in your answer sheet on the top right hand side. You can also mention the city and state from where you are posting your answer, and this will help us in knowing that the students are benefiting across India and DNS is reaching every nook and corner of the country. And in the description of today's video, there is a link for the question assignment where you can participate in the discussion on the Rouse IAS eLearn platform. So click on the link given below and start practicing the mains answer writing from the Daily News Simplified videos. And the articles that we will discuss today are displayed on your screen. So let us start our discussion. Now, this article on page number 15 reads that the center is formulating a research and development policy to bolster drug discovery. And this blueprint of this research and development policy also covers medical devices and includes incentives for the scientists. Now, in this regard, the Union Cabinet had approved the following schemes in March 2020. And these schemes are known as the Promotion of Medical Device Parks and Promotion Linked Incentive Scheme. So this aspect of the present status of medical device industry in India and also what are the problems that are faced by the medical device industry are important for us from the General Studies paper 3 point of view under the topic Economic Development. Now we note that the Indian medical industry is a sunrise segment in healthcare space, and the production of medical devices is a growing sector and its potential for growth is the highest among all the sectors in healthcare market. It is presently valued at rupees 50,000 crore and is expected to reach to rupees 86,000 crore by 2021 and 22. However, India depends on imports and these imports amount to about 85% of the total domestic demand of medical devices. So in order to achieve self-sufficiency and become major exporter of medical devices, these two schemes were approved by the Union Cabinet. So in this regard, let us look at the present status of medical device industry in India. What are the problems faced by this industry and what are these schemes all about? So now regarding the present status of medical device industry in India, you should note that the Indian healthcare industry was valued at over $100 billion in the year 2016. And if it keeps on growing at a cumulative growth rate of 20%, it will reach about $175 billion soon. Further, the medical device industry was accorded the status of independent industry in 2014. And this was done when it was included as one of the focus sectors of Make in India program of the Government of India. Now, one of the issues with the present status of medical device industry is that it is highly fragmented in nature. And currently, this sector is dominated by multinational companies, and due to this, 80 to 85% of the demand of the medical devices is met through imports. And approximately around 30% of the domestically manufactured devices are export, and in which consumables and disposable segment has the largest share. So this is the present status of the medical device industry in India, which is an important sector in the healthcare sector. So now let us look at what are the problems faced by these medical device industry. So, first and foremost is the lack of favorable policy and regulatory framework. And that is why we note that the government of India has passed two schemes to promote medical device industry. And also the government is trying to formulate a research and development policy. Further, another issue that is faced by the medical device industry is that, unlike the pharmaceuticals industry, the manufacturing of medical devices is dependent on a mix of technologies, for example, engineering, electronics, material science, and information technology. And because the manufacturing of medical devices industry is dependent upon mix of technologies, the government of India has failed to emphasize on the domestic manufacturing of medical devices. Further, the medical device sector in India suffers due to lack of adequate infrastructure, domestic supply chain and logistics, high cost of finance, and inadequate availability of quality power, and also limited design capabilities, and also low focus on research and development and skill development. So these are few problems that are faced by the medical devices industry, and this is the present status of medical device industry in India. So in this background, let us look at both the schemes that have been unveiled by the government of India. So the first scheme is named as the promotion of medical devices parks, and this scheme aims at promoting medical device parks in country in partnership with the state governments. So the financial assistance that will be provided under this scheme will be a maximum grant in aid of rupees 100 crore per medical device park, and this will be provided to the state governments. So in this case, the implementation agency will be the state implementing agency, and the target is that to provide financial assistance for common infrastructure facilities for 4 medical device parks. Another scheme, that is the production linked incentive scheme, aims to boost domestic manufacturing by attracting large investment in the medical device sector. And under this, incentives will be provided at 5% of the incremental sales over the base year 2019 and 20. And this will be provided on the segments of medical devices that have been identified under this particular scheme. Further, regarding the implementation agency, it will be the project management agency, and that will be dominated by Department of Pharmaceuticals. Now, what is the target under this? So the target is to provide assistance to about 25 to 30 manufacturers, and these should fall under following categories of medical devices. So it will include the manufacturers of cancer or radiotherapy medical devices, again the radiology and imaging medical devices, anesthetics and cardiorespiratory medical devices, and all implants, which will include implantable electronic devices like the cochlear implants and pacemakers. So now the likely benefits of implementing such a scheme is that it will boost domestic manufacturing and attract large investment in the medical device sector. Further, setting up of common infrastructure facilities in 4 medical device parks is expected to reduce the manufacturing cost of medical devices. Further, it will also help in generating additional employment of about 34,000 jobs over a period of 5 years. And one of the important likely benefit is the substantial reduction in the import of medical devices. So these were few aspects of the medical device industry in India, and with this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 7 talks about the issues that are created because of the nuclear weapon states and what are the vulnerabilities that are created because of the nuclear weapons. Now, we note that on the present day in 1945, the United States of America had dropped a uranium gun type bomb on Hiroshima. And this was one of the first instances of use of nuclear weapons in the world. So on the anniversary of the atom bomb which was dropped by United States of America, this article talks about the threats that are posed due to nuclearization of the world. And this article further throws light on the vulnerabilities regarding the current arguments in the favor of nuclear armaments and weapons. So in this we will discuss 2 instances of use of nuclear weapons which will be important for us from preliminary examination perspective, and also what is the current status of nuclearization across the globe and what are the vulnerabilities regarding the nuclear weapons. So we note that there are only 2 instances of use of nuclear weapons so far. First was on August 6, 1945, when United States of America dropped a uranium gun type bomb which was known as Little Boy on Hiroshima. And 3 days later, the United States of America had dropped a plutonium implosion bomb which was known as Fat Man on Nagasaki, which is another town of Japan. So the names of these two bombs which were dropped by United States of America on these two cities of Japan are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. Now these two bombs killed about 2 lakh people and injured a similar number. And the people who were injured and survived after these bombings are known as Hibakusha. Now these are the two only instances when the nuclear weapons have been used in the human history. However, this does not close the possibility of another use of nuclear weapons in the near future. And that is why it is important to discuss the vulnerabilities that are created by the nuclear weapons and the arguments that are cited by various analysts in favor of nuclear weapons. So these aspects can be important for us from General Studies Paper 3 point of view under the topic security. Now regarding the current status of nuclearization across the globe, you should note that since 1945, the United States of America, the Soviet Union or the present day Russia, the United Kingdom, France, China, Israel, India, Pakistan and North Korea have armed themselves with nuclear weapons. And these new nuclear weapons are much more destructive in comparison to the bombs that were used in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Regarding the numbers of the nuclear weapons across the globe, about 1,26,000 nuclear weapons have been built since the first atom bomb was used. And over 2,000 of them have been used in nuclear tests which have been conducted above or below the ground. And this was done in order to demonstrate their explosive powers. Now, what has been the issue with such experimental explosions is that they cause grave and long-lasting damage to the environment and public health. So in this map, you can see the number of nuclear weapons possessed by these countries in 2017. Now, after looking at the current status of nuclearization, let us look at the vulnerabilities regarding these nuclear weapons. Now, some of the arguments that have been furthered regarding these nuclear weapons is that they do not provide any real defense, and that is because of the speed and accuracy of the delivery systems that are being used to deliver the nuclear weapons. Now, many a times we hear that countries are building ballistic missile defense system. However, the authors argue that there is no realistic way to protect ourselves against the nuclear weapons. And since the invention of ballistic missiles at the end of 1950s, it has been impossible to intercept nuclear weapons once they are launched. So due to the usage of ballistic missile systems or the invention of ballistic missile systems at the end of 1950s, both the nuclear weapon states as well as the non-nuclear weapon states are vulnerable because of possessing nuclear weapons, because of the accuracy that is provided by the ballistic missile systems for the delivery of nuclear weapons. Further, we hear the argument that the nuclear weapons provide or create a kind of deterrence. And we have been listening to this argument in case of India and Pakistan, who are both nuclear weapon states. And in this, the argument that is provided is that both the countries will not risk the escalation of any war which might lead to the usage of nuclear weapons. Now, regarding the problem of deterrence due to the nuclear weapons, we hear that the nuclear deterrence is enough to prevent the use of nuclear weapons. And the idea that is furthered is that the nuclear weapons are so destructive that no country would use them. And this is because such use would invite retaliation in kind, and no political leader would be willing to risk the possible death of millions of its citizens. Now, the supporter of such an argument say that the nuclear weapons do not just protect the countries against the use of nuclear weapons by others, but these nuclear weapons also prevent war and promote stability and peace. However, the authors argue that these claims of deterrence because of nuclear weapons are false or wrong in nature. And that is because countries with nuclear weapons have in fact gone to war quite often as compared to the non-nuclear weapon possessing states. And we have seen the conflicts in case of India and Pakistan, India and China, and also in the Crimean Peninsula by Russia. Further, we have seen that the nuclear threats have often led to escalation, and this was seen in the case of Cuban Missile Crisis. Thus, the argument that the possession of nuclear weapons create a kind of deterrence against war is a flawed one. Further, it is said that the nuclear weapons are controllable, and when they are put in the responsible hands, their misuse can be avoided, or accidents due to nuclear weapons can be avoided. However, the authors argue that in the real world, it is not possible for the planners to have complete control over the nuclear weapons. And many scholars have said that the overconfidence that is created because of the possession of nuclear weapons is more likely to lead to accidents and possibility of usage of such nuclear weapons. So these are some of the arguments and counter arguments and the vulnerabilities that are created because of the possession of nuclear weapons. With this, let's take up the next news article now. Now, this article on page number 10 is related to the issue of economically weaker sections quota that was recently provided by amending the Constitution of India. And this article states that this EWS quota that has been provided has been challenged and referred to the constitutional bench by the Supreme Court of India. So in this article, we'll look at the grounds on which this EWS quota has been challenged in the Supreme Court and what is the view of central government regarding providing of 10% reservation to the economically weaker sections. And after that, we will look at the constitutional provisions that have been amended and used to provide this EWS quota. So this can become important for us from General Studies paper 2 point of view under the topic Constitution and Polity. So we all know that the EWS reservation quota was provided by the Constitution's 103rd Amendment Act that was passed in 2019. And this EWS quota has been challenged in the Supreme Court. So regarding the grounds of challenging this EWS quota, the Supreme Court will decide as to whether the economic backwardness can be the sole criteria for granting quota in government jobs and educational institutions. And the second issue that the Supreme Court will look at is whether the grant of 10% reservation to the EWS sections is unconstitutional and it violates the 50% ceiling cap on the quota that has been provided by the Supreme Court of India in the Indira Sahni case. So we all know that the Supreme Court had put a cap of 50% on the reservation under the Indira Sahni case. So this plea in the Supreme Court will decide whether the grant of 10% additional reservation to the economically weaker sections is constitutional or not. Now, what is the view of central government on granting this 10% reservation in addition to the 50% quota that has been already provided to the other backward classes and the scheduled castes and scheduled tribes? So in this, the central government has argued that it was every state government's prerogative to provide 10% economic reservation in the state government jobs and admission in the state-run educational institutions. So whether or not to provide the reservation to the economically weaker sections is to be decided by the state government concerned. And regarding the EWS quota, we note that it was provided by amending the Constitution through the 103rd Constitutional Amendment Act of 2019. And what this Amendment Act did was that it provided for reservation of 10% over and above the existing 50% reservation which is enjoyed by the SC, ST and the OBC classes. And this will take the total reservation to 60%. So the reservation intends to include such members who do not avail the benefits of reservation, and this includes the members in the general category as well as members of minority communities which include the Muslims, Sikhs, Buddhists, Christians and other communities who do not enjoy any kind of reservation. Now here it is important to note that this EWS quota shall be notified by the state from time to time on the basis of family income and other indicators of economic disadvantage. So now which provision of the directive principle of state policy was utilized by the central government for amending the Constitution of India? So to provide for the reservation to the economically weaker section, the central government used the directive principle of state policy which is contained in the Article 46 of the Constitution. And this article mentions that the state shall promote with special care the educational and economic interests of the weaker sections of people and in particular of the SCs and the STs. But initially in this article, the economically weaker sections of the citizens were not eligible for the benefit of reservation. However, this has now been provided. So this is one of the ground on which the EWS quota has been challenged. Further, by bringing in the EWS quota, the Article 15 and Article 16 of the Indian Constitution were also amended. So in this, a new provision was inserted, that was Article 15 and subsection 6. And this provided that the state can make any special provision for the advancement of any economically weaker sections of the society. Secondly, the state government can make any special provision for the advancement of any economically weaker section of the society and relating to their admission in the education institutions and also including the private educational institutions, whether aided or unaided by the state. And such kind of reservation shall not apply to the minority educational institutions, and reservation to such educational institutions would be in addition to the existing reservations subject to a maximum of 10%. And regarding the amendment in Article 16, a new provision was inserted, that was Article 16(6), and it states that the state may make any provision for the reservation of appointments or posts in favor of economically weaker sections of the society in addition to the existing reservation and subject to a maximum of 10%. So these were the amendments that were brought in the Constitution in the Directive Principles of State Policy, Article 46, and in the Articles 15 and 16. And these can be very important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So this is again in the Supreme Court, and the constitutional bench will decide as to the EWS quota is constitutional or not. So these are few important points, and with this let's take up the next news article now. Now this article on page number 11 talks about the Bru refugees, and this can be very important for us from the preliminary examination point of view under the topic current events of national importance. So in this article, what is important is the Bru tribe, and that is important for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So let us look at this issue of Bru tribes resettlement that was in news in the month of January and has now again appeared in the newspapers. Now we have already covered this issue of Bru tribes in the month of January in a Daily News Simplified video. So let us revise from that video as to what was the issue and what are the important points for us from the preliminary examination point of view. So now these Bru tribals are spread across Tripura, Mizoram and southern parts of Assam. And in Mizoram, they are predominantly found in two districts, that are the Kolasib and the Mamit. Now these Bru tribes are also called as the Riang. And these Riang tribes are ethnically different from the native Mizos of the Mizoram. And due to this ethnic difference, there were ethnic clashes between the Riangs or the Brus and the Mizo tribes. And due to these ethnic clashes between the Brus and the Mizos, 5,000 Bru families fled from Mizoram and took refuge in Tripura in the year 1997. So now the government is trying to permanently rehabilitate these refugees in Tripura. So the distribution or the districts in which these Bru tribes live are important for us from the preliminary examination point of view, and especially the states in which these Bru tribes live. So recently the Indian government, the governments of Tripura and Mizoram, and the representatives of the Bru community got into an agreement. And this agreement provides for permanently settling the Bru refugees in Tripura. So these are called refugees because they have migrated from Mizoram into Tripura. So under this agreement, 34 Bru refugees were to be settled in Tripura, and the central government department has provided a package of rupees 600 crores. Further, the refugees will get all the rights that are enjoyed by the residents of Tripura. And in this, several facilities will be provided as to free residential plots, free ration for 2 years, fixed deposit of 4 lakh rupees, and 5,000 cash aid for 2 years. So these are few important points related to the Bru tribals who have migrated from Mizoram into Tripura due to the ethnic clashes between the native Mizos and the Bru tribals. And the present news article states that the Bru community has rejected the sites where the government was trying to build the permanent settlements for these Bru tribals. So with this, let's take up the next news article now. Now this article on page number 6 focuses on the issue of migration that happened during the lockdown in the background of COVID-19 pandemic. And in this, the author has provided the sociological analysis of the issue of migration that happened during the lockdown and the migration that happens during the threats to life of the migrant laborers. And this can be a very important aspect for us from the General Studies paper 1 point of view under the topic society. Now, the author in this article has mainly argued that the migration that happened during the lockdown happened not because of the economic crisis, but it happened because of the fear of dying alone and with nobody to perform the last rites to the dead. So basically, the author has provided arguments in favor of this hypothesis that for the migrant urban laborers, the family becomes very important as compared to the economic situation. And this is mainly because unemployment is not unknown to the urban migrant laborers. Further, it is not the industrial opportunity but the family glue that becomes important during the times of threat. And the people who migrated during this lockdown and the people who mainly migrate during the times of threat are single men and not the women. So let us look at all these arguments that have been forwarded by the author in this regard, and they can become very important for us in the paper 1 of general studies. So, in this line, the author has said that it is not the economic compulsion but the attraction for the family that forced the urban migrant laborer to migrate back to their villages. And this is mainly because unemployment is a part of life for the urban migrant laborers. And as such, the Indian urban migrant laborer is not much rattled by the issue of joblessness. And this is mainly because 93% of the Indian economy works in the informal sector, and there the employment opportunities keep on shifting. And the issue of unemployment has been further aggravated by the Industrial Disputes Act, and this is because it mandates the employers to pay severance wages and other benefits only if the workers are hired and are on rolls, and they are hired and on roll continuously for over 248 days. So, this Industrial Disputes Act makes it attractive for the management to periodically hire and fire the laborer. So, this shows that even the Industrial Dispute Act does not provide for permanency in the employment to the urban migrant laborers. And as such, unemployment is not unknown to the urban migrant laborers, and it is not the unemployment or the economic situation that forces the urban migrant laborers to move back to their villages, and it is the attraction to their family that is the main factor. So, in this, it is not the industrial opportunity but the family glue that attracts the urban migrant laborers during the times of threats. So, when faced with a threat, the attraction towards family is stronger than the opportunity that is provided by the industry to the migrant laborers. And the argument is that the unemployment does not send migrant workers to their families because the families back in the villages are already poor and are in no position to help these migrant laborers financially. So, this issue of industrial opportunity versus the attraction towards the family has been highlighted various times in the Indian history. So, in Surat in 1979, which is an industrially developed city, there was a widespread fear that a satellite was going to fall back in the city, and this could have caused untold deaths. And due to this fear, a large number of migrants there started leaving for the villages, and they did not stay back to enjoy the employment opportunities that were provided by the city of Surat. Again in Surat in 1994, when the plague scare was seen, it prompted over 6 lakh migrant workers to leave their work and move back to their villages. So, in both these instances, jobs were not threatened, but there was perceived fear of death. On the other hand, the author argues that when demonetization happened in 2016, only a few migrant workers left because this distress was primarily economic and there was no threat to life per se. And that is why the author says that it is not the unemployment but the attraction for the families during the times of threat that send back the migrant laborers to the villages. And this is because unemployment is not unknown to the urban migrant laborer. Other factor that prompts the decision of the urban migrant laborer to move back to the villages during the times of threat to life are the rituals and the customs that are prevalent in different communities. So, among the Muslims, washing of the body as well as the lowering of the shrouded corpse are important aspects of death rituals, and they need to be performed by the immediate family members only. And among the Hindus, the male bloodkin alone can perform the pindan and the ritual erasure of debts or the rin of the dead relative. And if these rules are not followed correctly, then the soul of the dead person would keep wandering, and that is the main belief in major religions. So, during the times of threat to the life, the urban migrant laborers are more concerned about the rituals and the customs that need to be followed if death follows. Further, the author argued that less number of women migrated during the COVID-19 lockdown, and women who form 55%, that is the majority of rural migrants to urban India, stayed back in the urban areas only. And it was mainly because the women came to urban areas because of arranged marriages, and it was not the prospect of job that brought these women in the urban spaces. And since the women came to the cities because of arranged marriages, the women stayed with their families in the urban areas, and it was the single rural men who work as migrant laborers who migrated back to the villages due to the threat to their lives, and it was because they did not stay with their families. So, giving a sociological perspective to the issue of migration during the COVID 19 lockdown, the author argues that it is not the economic opportunity or the attraction towards employment that makes the urban migrant laborer to decide the issue of going back to their villages. But what forces them to go back to their villages are the issue of rituals and the customs that are to be followed after death, and for that the family members are very important, and that is why majority of the people who migrated during the COVID-19 lockdown were single men and not women who stay in the urban spaces with their families. So with this we conclude today's discussion, and this is the question for the day.